use the best available science to restore our landscapes, open up new outdoor recreation opportunities for everyone, put our public lands to work in confronting the climate crisis, and help Indian country recover and rebuild from COVID-19. I am eager to support her confirmation so she can get to work protecting our natural heritage for future generations, and I sincerely hope that the other members of this committee will join me in supporting her nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. Now I'm going to introduce Representative Don Young, our friend from the other side of the aisle, if you will. I'll have him introduce Representative Haaland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Manchin, and thank you, Mr. Barrasso, the ranking member, and all other members of the committee. You may be wondering why I'm doing this, because I am here because Debbie and I became friends when she was the chairman of the Lands Committee. I was the ranking member on it. And I've had her reach across and talk to me about issues that affect Alaska and other areas. But I will tell you, if you don't know, I'm going to give you a little history. I'm the Dean of the House. I'm the oldest member of both bodies. I have served with 10 presidents and 15 secretaries of Interior. There's not much I don't and have not seen. I have a theory, because I'm a mariner, that the captain of the ship has a right to choose who he has as his crew. I'm not always agreed with the secretaries of Interior, but I will say that that's the responsibility of the president. President Biden has chosen Deb, and she is accepted, and I would suggest respectfully you'll find out that she will listen to you. She may not change. Like, she and I do not agree on carbon fuels. You know that. We've said this before. But it's my job to try to convince her that she's not all right, and her job to convince me I'm not all right. That's the important part about the secretary. Also, you keep in mind that another reason I'm supporting her, she is an American Indian. I am quite proud of that fact. I'm close to my Alaska Natives and American Indians. And like you mentioned about, it's a long time overdue. There should have been a Secretary of Interior long before. We were fortunate to have Morris Thompson, a friend of mine, as the BIA director. And we had Tara Sweeney as a BIA director. But always the BIA has been under the, I call it, under the top of the Park Service and all the other agencies under the Department of Interior. They were actually forgotten. And I think Deb will bring a new role to this, because she has an interest. Of course, she is one. And she'll be able to take and raise the American Indian, the first Americans, to the position I think they can be and have achieved in the state of Alaska. For that, I'm very proud of it. You know, I heard her introduced by the other members some of the things she's done, but she worked with me. She is across the aisle. We introduced the Indian Buffalo Management Act, passed. The Progress Act, passed. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Badges Act, passed. This is bipartisan. So she's been able to do that. And I would suggest respectfully that her belonging to a Pueblo, or her working with her Native people, will be beneficial to the Secretary of Interior. As the ranking member mentioned, a lot of responsibility, huge amounts of lands that a lot of people don't recognize. And accessibility is crucial to me as far as an American. We've had previous Secretaries of Interior that really disallowed access. And I'm saying that's inappropriate. I want her to be able to consider the fact that there's many accesses to these lands that don't just take pictures. And now I'm going to talk about, I love to hunt. And everybody says, well, that's terrible. It's not. It's the management of game. And I want her to understand a lot of these lands that we're prohibited of might be accessible for management of fish and wildlife. I will say I think she is a friend, and as a member of this, I say administration, she'll do a good job. She'll work for us, and she'll reach across the aisle. I have a lot, by the way, at stake here. I am an oil-producing state, too. And we lost a lot of jobs, not because of Deb. We lost them because of the president and signed an executive order. Really a hardship on us. We're trying to explain, if we have people in the Department of Interior such as Deb, maybe there'll be a balance. And anybody thinks you're going to cut off fossil fuel immediately is smoking pot. That's legally in the state of Alaska, by the way. But I'm just saying they're not realizing, you know, only 19% of a barrel of oil is used for propulsion. The rest of it, if you look around this room, including that rug, all kinds of different uses. Coal and oil molecules are the biggest structure elements we have in our society today. And I know this is being done because of climate change. I recognize that. But that won't solve the problem. If we're going to do this, we have to work it into it gradually. We'll find out all the sources of energy may not be the best in the world like they did in Texas. So I want this secretary, as she's confirmed, I hope you do confirm her, understand there's a broad picture here. And her job is to understand is no longer a little cartoon. This is the big picture. And she'll have to have the responsibility to do the job I know she can do. And I urge a confirmation of Deb for the Secretary of Interior. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congressman. And you are more than welcome to stay if you'd like to. If not, we understand you probably have a pressing schedule.
You're through with me. Thank you.
Thank you. The rules of the committee, which apply to all nominees, require that they be sworn in connection with their testimony. So if you would rise and raise your right hand, Congresswoman. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
You may be seated. I'm going to ask you 3 questions addressed to each nominee before this committee. So will you be available to appear before the committee and other congressional committees to represent department positions and respond to issues of concern to the Congress?
Yes, Chairman.
Are you aware of any personal holdings, investments, or interests that could constitute a conflict of interest or create the appearance of such a conflict should you be confirmed and assume the office to which you have been nominated by the President?
No, Chairman.
Are you involved or do you have any assets held in a blind trust?
No, sir.
Thank you. We're going to start with our questions now, and I'll take the liberty of asking a few questions, and we'll... Oh, I'm so sorry. You go ahead and make your opening statement, then we'll move to the questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chairman's just getting used to this job.
Guatsi Hopa Duhiname Itzartuitza Shuimi Hanu. Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, members of the committee, thank you so much for having me here today. I wouldn't be here without the love and support of my child Soma, my partner Skip, who is with me this morning, sitting behind me, my mom, Mary Toya, who is watching from Isleta Pueblo, my extended family, and generations of ancestors who have sacrificed so much so I could be here today. I acknowledge that we are on the ancestral homelands of the Nacotchtank, Anacostan, and Piscataway people. As many of you know, my story is unique. Although today I serve as a member of Congress and was the vice chair of the House Natural Resources Committee, if confirmed, I would be the first Native American to serve as Cabinet Secretary. This historic nature of my confirmation is not lost on me, but I will say it's not about me. Rather, I hope this nomination would be an inspiration for Americans moving forward together as one nation and creating opportunities for all of us. As the daughter of a Pueblo woman, I was taught to value hard work. My mother is a Navy veteran, was a civil servant at the Bureau of Indian Education for 25 years, and she raised 4 kids as a military wife. My dad, the grandson of immigrants, was a 30-year career Marine who served in Vietnam. He received the Silver Star and is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. I spent summers in Mesita, our small village on Laguna Pueblo, the location of my grandparents' traditional home. It was there that I learned about my culture from my grandmother by watching her cook and by participating in traditional feast days and ceremonies. It was in the cornfields with my grandfather where I learned the importance of water and protecting our resources, where I gained a deep respect for the earth. As a military family, we moved every few years when I was a kid, but no matter where we lived, my dad taught me and my siblings to appreciate nature, whether on a mountain trail or walking along the beach. I'm not a stranger to the struggles many families across America face today. I've lived most of my adult life paycheck to paycheck. I've pieced together health care for me and my child as a single mom, and at times relied on food stamps to put food on the table. It's because of these struggles that I fully understand the role Interior must play in the President's plan to build back better, to responsibly manage our natural resources, to protect them for future generations, so that we can continue to work, live, hunt, fish, and prey among them. I understand how important the department is for all the stakeholders who rely on it and the communities whose economies are connected to it. I know the bipartisan accomplishments of this committee stand out in Congress. Your work led to Interior having significant resources and authorities, especially with the Great American Outdoors Act and the Public Lands Package. I will work collaboratively with all members of this committee to ensure these acts are implemented well. As chair of the Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands, I also worked on these issues in Congress and listened to all of my colleagues and constituents about ways to improve management of the department. I am proud of the bipartisan manner in which we move these bills through my subcommittee and to the House floor. As I've learned in this role, there's no question that fossil energy does and will continue to play a major role in America for years to come. I know how important oil and gas revenues are to critical services, but we must also recognize that the energy industry is innovating, and our climate challenge must be addressed. Together, we can work to position our nation and all of its people for success in the future. And I am committed to working cooperatively with all stakeholders and all of Congress to strike the right balance going forward. As part of this balance, the department has a role in harnessing the clean energy potential of our public lands and to create jobs and new economic opportunities. The President's agenda demonstrates that America's public lands can and should be engines for clean energy production. President Biden also knows that restoring and conserving our lands through a civilian climate corps has the potential to spur job creation. If confirmed, I will work my heart out for everyone. The families of fossil fuel workers who help build our country, ranchers and farmers who care deeply for their lands, communities with legacies of toxic pollution, people of color whose stories deserve to be heard, and those who want jobs of the future. I vow to lead the Interior Department ethically and with honor and integrity. I will listen to and work with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. I will support Interior's public servants and be a careful steward of taxpayer dollars. I will ensure that the Interior Department's decisions are based on science. I will honor the sovereignty of tribal nations and recognize their part in America's story, and I'll be a fierce advocate for our public lands. I believe we all have a stake in the future of our country, and I believe that every one of us, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, shares a common bond. Our love for the outdoors and a desire and obligation to keep our nation livable for future generations. I carry my life experiences with me everywhere I go. It's those experiences that give me hope for the future. If an Indigenous woman from humble beginnings can be confirmed as Secretary of the Interior, our country holds promise for everyone. Finally, I want to give special thanks to you, Chairman Manchin, for calling this hearing today and for sharing with me the issues and needs of the people that you represent in West Virginia. If confirmed, I will listen to all of the people represented by members of this committee and this Congress. I'm grateful for your time today, and I'm ready to serve. And thank you, Senator Heinrich, for your kind introduction, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Congressman Haaland. And now we will begin our questions. Congressman, the United States became a net total energy exporter in 2019. That's the first time in 67 years we've been in that position, partly due to the surge in domestic oil and gas production. And in your opening statement, you noted that fossil energy does and will continue to play a major role in America for years to come. So my question would be, do you believe that it's in our best interest to maintain our energy independence? And what role do you see fossil energy playing in that?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. And yes, of course, we absolutely need energy independence, and I believe President Biden agrees with that statement as well. I know that we want to move forward with some clean energy. We want to get to net zero, and as the chairwoman of the Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands, yes, 25% of our carbon comes from our public lands. So I think that as we move forward with the technology that you and I spoke about when we had our conversation, we want to move forward with innovation and all of this for our energy needs. So I think that's not going to happen overnight. And so we will absolutely rely on the fossil energy that you and the ranking member spoke about in your opening statements. But at the same time, I think we can move forward with the technology and innovation as well.
Yeah. Well, I think you pretty much know my position on that. I'm totally committed to innovation, not elimination, because I think we can do it in a practical, responsible way. I said in my opening statement, the Department of Interior is a massive agency, as you have just heard, the responsibilities that come with that, being head of that agency. So if you're focusing on the big picture, what do you or that you would like to have for your leadership?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chairman. Well, of course, I feel, as I mentioned in my opening statement, my mom was a federal employee for 25 years. I value the dedication of our career employees, and I believe very strongly that we need to make sure that we are appreciating them the way they should be appreciated so they can do their jobs. I want very much to help make sure that everyone's working together. With respect to clean energy, yes, that's absolutely a priority of President Biden, his Build Back Better plan to create those clean energy jobs across the country. The Civilian Climate Corps that I know will engage tens of thousands of Americans in the work of restoring our public lands is also important. And if I will say with respect to Indian country, I worked very hard in Congress in my first term on broadband internet, and I think that during this pandemic we have seen the disparities that a lot of communities face as that has unfolded. Broadband internet service, and of course I will say with respect to Indian country, missing and murdered indigenous women, grateful for the help of senators on this side of the Capitol who have helped me move that issue forward. I think with 2 bills passing, that's the tip of the iceberg.
Let me say, since 1977, coal companies, since I'm very familiar with the coal countries and coal companies that work in those areas, they've paid a fee for every ton of coal they have mined to fund the abandoned mine land reclamation. We call it the AML program. If confirmed, you will oversee the agency that administers the AML program and the Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement, which we call SMACRA. With that, the hard rock mining hasn't had any changes in their law since 1872. They don't adhere to the same restrictions that we do. We've talked about basically making those changes that are most responsible and most needed. We're not hindering any company whatsoever, except we have an awful lot of hard rock mining that's gone left unclaimed and unrestored that could be put back in productive use. So I just want to know, if confirmed as Secretary, do you intend to continue supporting extension of the fee collection authority of SMACRA, which is the AML money? And a lot of people want to eliminate that, and I think it would be detrimental to our environment. And do you support extending those fees for an additional 15 years? That's what we're talking about, to take care of all the abandoned line. And would you be receptive to looking at the hard rock mining to make sure they come into compliance to take care of their responsibilities?
Thank you, Chairman. And yes, I'm very familiar with abandoned mines, and we have a lot of them in New Mexico, particularly on the Navajo Nation, and we've seen that it's polluted water. And so I agree wholeheartedly that we need the resources to make sure we are protecting the health and safety of our fellow Americans. And so I look forward to working with you on this issue. And I think that if we have the resources to clean those things up, that it'll make life easier for everybody.
Thank you, Congressman. I have many more questions, but my time is up, and I'm going to go now to my friend, Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks so much, Senator Manchin. I'd just like to follow up on some of the things that Senator Manchin started with. Yes or no answers on this, if you could. As a general matter, should the federal government continue to permit oil and gas wells in this country?
Yes, and I believe that's happening.
And as a general matter, should the federal government continue to permit coal mines in this country?
Yes, and Ranking Member, if I could just say, I know that coal mines were not a part of President Biden's executive order.
As a general matter, should the federal government continue to permit copper, lithium, and other hard rock mines in this country. Senator Manchin was just asking about some hard rock mining issues.
Senator, I believe that if we do these things in a responsible manner and protect the health and safety of workers, I see us moving forward. The earth is here to provide for us, and that's my belief.
As a general matter, should the federal government continue to permit natural gas pipelines in this country?
Senator, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I believe this will go on for quite some time, and I know that President Biden he has put a pause on new leases, not existing ones.
The question was on pipelines. So as a general matter, should the federal government continue to permit oil pipelines in the country?
Senator, with respect to the Department of Interior, wherever pipelines fall under the authority of the Department of Interior, of course.
As a general matter, should the federal government continue to permit electrical transmission lines in this country?
I believe that would help our energy needs, sir.
And as a general matter, should the federal government continue to permit natural gas or nuclear power plants in the country?
Senator, I assume that what I would like to say is, if I'm confirmed as Secretary, of course, I would follow the law on all of these things.
I think one of the concerns that we have is that there are 3 senators on this committee are medical doctors. We have Dr. Cassidy, who's a gastroenterologist. Dr. Marshall is an obstetrician. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. And just a couple of months ago, you tweeted, "Republicans don't believe in science." Pretty broad statement that you made there, and it was on your, this was in October of 2020, so not too long ago. Mm-hmm. Now, we're also Republicans. Do you think that as medical doctors we don't believe in science? I mean, how do you stand by this statement?
Senator, yes, if you're a doctor, I would assume that you believe in science.
Well, Republicans as well. So, I mean, it's concerning to those of us who've gone through training, believe in science, and yet for a broad brush that we're all disbelievers. It's a concern to those of us as we're here today to ask questions about. So, in his first few weeks in office, President Biden issued several orders, as we talked about, banning new oil and natural gas leasing on federal lands and waters. It's estimated this long-term leasing ban is going to cost your home state of New Mexico 62,000 jobs, my home state of Wyoming 33,000 jobs. A long-term leasing ban is also going to cost, and I kind of run around the table here of members on this committee, Louisiana, 48,000 jobs, Colorado, 18,000 jobs, Mississippi, 14,000 jobs, North Dakota, 13,000 jobs, Utah, 11,000 jobs, 7,000 jobs in Alaska and Montana. Those are just jobs represented by people on this committee. Now you had said you will work your heart out for everyone, including fossil fuel workers. My question is for you, why not just let these workers keep their jobs?
Senator, it's my understanding that President Biden has put just a pause on new leases. He didn't ban new leases. He didn't put a moratorium on new leases. It's a pause to review the fossil program at the federal fossil fuel program. And so I know that there are still thousands of leases and thousands of permits that are moving forward. And
and if confirmed, would you tell the president that it's not unwise to continue the pause as a permanent ban?
I don't believe that it is a permanent ban, Senator. I am more than happy to work with you and to work with, of course, at the pleasure of the president, and along with, if I'm confirmed, my colleagues, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to create jobs for Americans.
Because President Biden has justified his ban on new oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters. He cited climate change. Are you aware of any evidence that suggests that a ban on oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters was going to reduce the world's total production of oil and gas?
I bet no, sir.
Yeah, and are we aware of any evidence that suggests that a ban on oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters is going to reduce the world's total consumption of oil and gas?
Ranking member, I haven't actually looked at all of these statistics, but I believe that it's a situation where everyone should work together.
Yeah, because it seems that the president's ban on oil and gas leasing isn't going to reduce the world's production or consumption of oil and gas. So I would just return to the question of why why we wouldn't let these Americans keep their jobs, because we're not seeing any other country has banned energy production because of climate change. Russia hasn't done it, Saudi Arabia, Iran, India, China. So I continue to believe it's a misguided decision by the president. So thanks so much. And I have questions for a second round, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cantwell. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman Haaland, congratulations on your historic nomination. And I so appreciate your leadership in the House. I tell you, you had one of the greatest moments, I think, for the state of Washington when you led the final passage of the Spokane settlement bill. To see Native American woman standing there on the House floor helping us get something passed that took such a long time. And I would venture to say that if you had been Interior Secretary during that time period, we might have actually gotten this done sooner. So mark me down as one who very much appreciates the fact that the Secretary of Interior, being Native American, will give us an extra advantage on BIA issues that are so important to Indian country overall. So thank you for that. And so glad you mentioned the Great American Outdoors Act. I almost feel like your nomination is this proxy fight about the future of fossil fuels. And you've already stated very clearly here, you are going to carry out President Biden's agenda. And so we very much appreciate the fact that you're doing that. And that's what I think a president deserves, his nominee. So I think with the Great American Outdoors Act, we saw the value of public lands. In fact, we saw that the value of creating more outdoor recreation helped a juggernaut of an industry now become third just behind finance and healthcare as a very big job employer in the United States of America. So I hope that our colleagues will think about our bipartisan success there and how much those public lands mean to us from an economic revenue perspective. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, obviously on the coal leasing front, is that under Secretary Jewell and the Obama administration, you know, we were trying to get accurate assessments of the value of federal leasing of coal revenues. When I was ranking member, we pushed for this because obviously we have a lot of coal trains that go right through the state of Washington. The impacts of that accurate coal price matter because of mining in places like Powder River Basin, which accounts for 40% of the nation's annual supply and impacts communities all across our country. So I want to make sure, because the Trump administration then came and overturned that assessment. So I want to make sure that despite that decision, that you are going to work to make sure that there is a fair value for the taxpayer on the price of coal leasing and the economic and climate impacts that it has.
Senator, our public lands belong to all of us, and taxpayers deserve to have a fair return. So I look forward to having more conversations about this and appreciate you raising this issue with me.
Thank you. Thank you. On the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, I wanted to make sure that you are committed to using a science-based approach when it comes to protecting the Arctic wildlife. I'm glad that the President has taken action to stop on leasing, but what can you tell me about your efforts to promote a science-based approach to protecting the Arctic Wildlife Refuge?
I can promise you that if I'm confirmed as Secretary, that we will be guided by science in all of those decisions.
And then on the issue of wildfires, which is a big Pacific Northwest issue, the Department of Interior has key tools that we have now given to it in the last big fire package that we were able to work on together. This is new technology for everything from forecasting to locating firefighters to the implementation of coordination with air support. Will you commit to continue to work to rapidly implement those provisions of the last legislation on fighting fire?
I believe very strongly, Senator, that technology can play an incredibly helpful role in detecting fires, and I appreciate you caring about that issue as well.
Thank you. And then just lastly, we were successful with Chairwoman Murkowski in passing the Yakima Basin Water Strategy bill, which is really about focusing on helping the Pacific Northwest come up with better strategies for farming, for fishing, for environmental issues. And I hope you'll continue to work with us on the Yakima Basin implementation and carrying forward on good water strategy for the Northwest.
Senator, this is our second conversation. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations, and I will look so forward to hearing more. And I think that if I'm confirmed, yes, we need to keep moving issues forward for the American people.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Haaland, for being here and for willingness to serve if confirmed. In 2019, you sent a letter to the Department of the Interior, the department that you've now been nominated to lead. And in that letter, you mentioned some concerns that you had with decisions regarding national monuments. And as I recall, the decisions in particular you were referring to, dealing with monuments, were things that you were worried might have been influenced by those who graze, mine, or use water on federal lands. So I want to ask you a question, just a brief yes or no answer will suffice here. Do you think it's appropriate for stakeholders to, people who have some sort of economic interest in the land or some sort of connection to the land, like communities where people use those lands for grazing and for other purposes, incidental and necessary to their day-to-day lives, to be involved in the national monument designation process? Or were you saying in that letter that you think such people shouldn't have a role in it?
Senator, I think with national monument designations, of course, it's folks on the ground, stakeholders, everyone deserves to have a say in those. We've had some of those come through our committee, and I realize it's a long process.
I'm pleased to hear that you're okay with having stakeholders have a say in it, because people who live close to the land are very much affected by it. Now, in Utah, national monuments have become something of a political football. And they're certainly poised to become even more of a political football, one that's tossed back and forth between political parties. Now, President Clinton and President Obama respectively designated some national monuments in Utah. President Clinton designated the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument back in 1996. And then 20 years later, President Obama designated the Bears Ears National Monument. President Trump reduced those monuments, consistent with the language of the Antiquities Act, requiring that the monument extend no further than the space that's necessary to be set aside to protect the purposes at issue. Do you think it's helpful when monuments end up bouncing back and forth between presidential administrations? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the American people and those who live near and are affected by these lands?
I understand what you're saying, Senator, and I know that the Antiquities Act is reserved for the President, whoever that may be, and not the Secretary of Interior. But I will say that, yes, it does appear that those things have gone back and forth depending on who's in office.
Do you think that this ricochet effect that we're talking about could be a result of presidents making monument designations that are not broadly supported by both political parties, particularly within the communities most immediately affected by them?
Well, it has been my experience. Most of the lands bills, most of the legislation that has come out of my subcommittee and our committee of natural resources on the House side have been more successful when they've been bipartisan.
Yes. And in this circumstance with national monuments, because we've given some 110 years ago, quite inadvisedly in my opinion, we've given presidents sweeping authority over this area. This eliminates as they might see it in the moment, the need for bipartisan action. And yet I think in order to avoid the ricochet effect that we're talking about, that we both agree is a bad thing, we need to make sure that there is widespread local buy-in. Now, we didn't have that with Bears Ears in 2016. We didn't have that with Grand Staircase 20 years earlier. And I think it's important to point out here, and I want to make sure you're aware, that of the 11.5 million acres of national monument designations occurring on land among 40 states over the last 25 years, 3.25 million of those are in Utah. That's 28%. Some of these monuments are quite large. And in Utah, the Grand Staircase and the Bears Ears National Monuments were originally 1.9 million acres and 1.3 million acres. Added together, that's larger than 2 Delawares. Now, do you think monuments of this size accurately reflect and embody the charge that Congress provided in the Antiquities Act to the effect that, quote, the limits of the parcels shall be confined to the smallest area compatible with the proper care and management of the objects to be protected? Is that usually something that in one state will be larger than 2 Delawares?
Senator, I want to say I'm a little jealous that you're from Utah and I'm from New Mexico, because I know you have so much beautiful land there and a lot of history. I've been to Bears Ears, and the Pueblo Indians' ancestral homeland is there, and I realize it covers a very wide space.
I appreciate you paying the compliment, my state. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. But the monument designation doesn't make them more beautiful. It does tend to make the communities that don't support them impoverished, and that's what concerns me.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate you sharing that knowledge with me.
Senator Sanders. Bernie,
for being here.
We got you.
All right. Let me start off by asking you a very broad but important question. The scientific community is telling us that if we do not get our act together, transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, that there will be irreparable damage done to our country and to the world in really just a very short period of time. Do you agree with that assessment that climate change is a major threat to the United States and the world?
Yes, Senator.
Can you give us some ideas as to the role that you will be playing in helping us cut carbon emissions and create the kinds of jobs that working families in this country desperately need?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. And if I'm confirmed as Secretary, I would be very proud to move President Biden's Build Back Better plan forward. That is a plan to create millions of jobs in clean energy, yes, the Civilian Climate Corps, as I mentioned in my opening statement, tens of thousands of jobs, inspiring young folks to restore our public lands and hopefully find careers in those areas. Additionally, we know that, and Senator Manchin mentioned this earlier, abandoned mines that need to be taken care of. Those are all jobs for Americans. Orphan gas wells. President Biden, I think he added up 250,000 jobs with respect to doing just that. So I believe there are millions of jobs in a clean energy future for Americans, and if I'm confirmed, I'd be honored to help the President move those forward.
Well, I am very excited about the concept of the Civilian Climate Corps because my experience suggests that there are millions of young people who would love the opportunity to help transform our energy system, help clean up the pollution that currently exists. And if they can get the training that they need, I think it would be a huge step forward for our younger people and for our economy as a whole. So I am excited about the Civilian Climate Corps. And if you are, in fact, confirmed, look forward to working with you to make that happen. Let me switch gear. Congresswoman, it is no secret that you are a proud Native American. And under the Interior Department, there will be the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Sadly, it is no secret that the way our government, from day one, from before we became a country, has treated the Native American people has been nothing less than shameful. I have been on reservations in this country where the life expectancy is less than third world countries. Can you tell us some of your ideas as to how we can improve life for Native American people and improve, in fact, the functioning of the Bureau of Indian Affairs?
Thank you, Senator. And first of all, I want to acknowledge the career staff, the career employees at Interior and across our government who have worked extremely hard over the decades. My mother was one of those. I mentioned earlier missing and murdered indigenous women. That is a very tragic issue in so many places, including my home state of New Mexico. This pandemic, as I've mentioned many times, has highlighted the disparities for communities of color, and Native communities are among those. I've read article after article on the Navajo Nation. People might have running water, but it's polluted from the mines. So there are so many ways. I think that if we are able to get broadband internet to make sure that Native children have the educational opportunities and the telehealth opportunities for everyone, that would be an excellent start. And
Congresswoman, if you could say a word about health care. My impression is that at least in various parts of the country, the Indian Health Service has not been providing the quality or accessibility to health care that people need. Can you say a word about that one?
Thank you, Senator. And yes, the Indian Health Service, which I have used many times from the time I was a young child, I can't blame the employees and the staff who dedicate their lives to caring for people. It's the job of the federal government to live up to the trust responsibility. And again, this pandemic has highlighted the disparities in the Indian Health Service, and I hope that we'll be able to get to a place where they have the resources they need. Currently, there's a hospital that's on Acoma Pueblo that we've been dealing with, closing down in the middle of a pandemic. These are things that we need to keep an eye on. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything, and everybody deserves to get the health care they need when they need it.
Good. Look forward to working with you on that issue as well. As you know, Congresswoman, right at the end of his term, the Trump administration made a last-minute push to finalize the transfer of the Oak Flat area in Arizona to foreign private mining interests. If confirmed, will you do everything within your power to prevent Oak Flat from being sacrificed?
Senator, thank you for caring about that issue. I believe that is within the purview of the Forest Service. However, if I have an opportunity, I would look forward to being briefed on it, to making sure that the voices of the tribal nation is heard with that issue.
Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to your confirmation and working with you in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Haaland, welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
I want to jump right into an issue of the Endangered Species Act. And the question is, when do you believe an endangered species has recovered?
You want to go?
And when it has recovered, do you support delisting and returning wildlife management back to the state?
Senator, of course, all of those decisions are based on science, as they should be. And I appreciate the question. I would look forward to, if there's any issues of that nature, if I'm confirmed, being briefed on them.
So we'll get into the science then.
Yeah.
Do you know what the recovery criteria are for the grizzly bear in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem?
Specifically, no, sir.
So the answer is 500 bears. And would you happen to know how many bears we currently have in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem?
I do not.
So the most conservative estimate is 728, well above the recovery target. Many estimate it's closer to 1,000 bears, well above the recovery criteria, well above carrying capacity. Yet on May 7th, 2019, you co-sponsored legislation that provided federal protections for the grizzly bear in perpetuity, forever. Why would you sponsor a bill like that when the science tells us the bear numbers are well above the recovery targets?
I imagine at the time I was caring about the bears.
And why don't you believe the grizzly management should return back to the states once the recovery targets are met?
Well, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be returned back to the states.
But that's what your legislation you co-sponsored said, is you would keep it in federal protections forever, in perpetuity.
Well, I would be happy to take a look at the issue, Senator, if I can help with that issue. Of course, I would love to speak with you more about it.
Okay. On November 19th, 2020, you said that if you had it your way, and I quote, you'd stop oil and gas leasing on public lands. As Secretary, you will get to have it your way. Will you recommend extending the leasing moratorium? And how do you justify this moratorium with the requirements of the federal law under the Mineral Leasing Act?
Senator, it's my understanding that it is a pause on just new leases, not existing valid leases. And if I'm confirmed as Secretary, it is President Biden's agenda, not my own agenda, that I would be moving forward, and appreciate your advice on this issue.
Over the last 2 years, you made numerous statements in opposition to energy development, including, and I quote you, no new pipelines in August of 2018. You called for a ban on fracking in 2020. Oil and gas development on public lands generates huge revenues for local schools, essential services. I have one county in Montana that over 90% of the revenues go to their schools come from pipelines. Unfortunately, this is not the case for wind and solar development on federal lands. What is your plan to make up for any lost local revenue for public safety and children's education?
Senator, as I mentioned earlier, if I'm confirmed as Secretary, it is President Biden's agenda that I would move forward, not my own. And I absolutely, nobody wants children to not have schools.
You earlier said you want to let the science and the data dictate policy and outcomes, if I could somewhat paraphrase what you said. So I assume you would want to make sure you look at the science and the data and not just blindly follow any administration.
Well, I apologize, Senator. Yes, the science and the data, I'm assuming, would go without saying, because I realize that the department relies on science, but
do you support
in a broader sense.
Do you support a ban on fracking and no new pipelines?
Senator, President Biden does not support a ban on fracking, is my understanding, and it would be his agenda that we would.
Yeah, but do you personally support a ban on fracking and no new pipelines?
Senator, if I could say, if I am confirmed as Secretary, I would be serving at the pleasure of the President, and it would be his agenda that I would move forward.
On October 8th, 2020, you stated, quote, anyone who says we have to sacrifice jobs for clean energy is just trying to scare us. We have a county, Fallon County, where Baker, Montana is. 60 people just lost their jobs and their benefits, union jobs, directly because of President Biden's executive actions. What jobs can they turn to now? What do I tell these 60 families that just lost their jobs as a result of President Biden's executive action?
Senator, I want you to know that I understand what that's like. I have struggled myself as well and been without a job at various times in my life. I will do everything I can. As I said, I mean it. I will work my heart out for every American. And if we can move President Biden's agenda forward together, we can create those millions of jobs. And I have every faith that that's something that we'll be able to.
Yeah, one of the ironies is these executive actions are actually going to increase emissions, not decrease emissions. The Keystone Pipeline was a zero net carbon project here by 2030. How do we address the increase in emission caused by President Biden's actions we've seen over the last month?
Senator, I would be happy to be briefed on the amount of emissions, and if I'm confirmed, absolutely work with you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time. I must tell you, I'm just concerned about proceeding with this nomination. The track record and the ideology in the past, I think, will perpetuate more divisiveness and will certainly harm Montana's economy, and that's why I have some concerns, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Senator Manchin, and I want to welcome the nominee and especially appreciate the fact that Congressman Young introduced you, Congresswoman. He has been a model of trying to work with people on both sides of the aisle, and I'm going to get into that question of bipartisan collaboration because it sounds like you're one of the leaders in terms of actually pulling people together to come up with bipartisan solutions. In other words, it's fine to talk about ideas, and it's also fine to say, well, I'm going to be bipartisan, and people can say, oh, I'll take somebody's lousy idea. You've really done the hard work to put together bipartisan coalitions, and I'm going to start with the first topic of rural jobs, because, as you know, Congressman Neguse and I have put together the 21st Century Civilian Conservation Corps, which would put together an effort with thousands of jobs in rural communities. And you just think about the number of vendors, and I see my friend from New Mexico who's been very interested in this issue as well. The number of vendors, for example, that would be selling goods and services to the 21st Century Civilian Conservation Corps would be a huge economic multiplier for rural communities. That's what rural jobs are really all about. So I think it'd be great if you could talk about a couple of the examples that were most important to you, both in terms of generating jobs in rural communities and in terms of coalition building, because those are two sides of the same coin. In rural America, my friend from New Mexico always kids me about our Oahe project that you and I have talked about. After 50 years of fighting and arguing about the Oahe, we've now put together what amounts to a first-of-its-kind coalition. Farmers and environmental folks and the like. So we'll get the jobs and we'll have the benefits of the environmental protection, which will be a big recreation engine for the area. So talk to us a little bit about your views on rural jobs, and you can start, for example, with the bill Congressman Neguse and I have, and talk about other areas that are important to you so people walk out of here recognizing what I saw, which is you're actually pulling people together. You got us sponsors for that bill with the congressman. So
thank you.
Let's hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator. And yes, I couldn't agree with you more that collaboration is absolutely important. And I was the highest rated freshman for bipartisanship in the 116th Congress. I think it's important. And in fact, the reason that Mr. Young and I became such good friends is that he helped me to pass a lot of bills. Our offices worked very well together. And I think that's important. We can have different views. We can think differently. If we were all the same, we probably wouldn't get a whole lot done either. But I feel like the people of New Mexico sent me to Congress to get work done, and that's precisely what I've done. I appreciate your you having the opportunity to bring ranchers, tribes, and folks together in those collaborations. My sister, she married a rancher and gave birth to 3 cowboys and a cowgirl. That's what they do. They care deeply about the land and their animals. And so I think that if we can all work together, if we can, I think we can do it all. I think we can work together. I think we can protect our public lands. I think we can create jobs. The Civilian Climate Corps is a brilliant idea, and I look forward to young people having those opportunities. It's a tough time in this country sometimes, and not every parent was like my dad. Not everyone has the opportunity, if they're working 2 and 3 jobs, to make sure their kids spend time outdoors. But I think giving opportunities to those young people will change their lives and give them the opportunity to care deeply about our environment.
Well, I appreciate your answer, Congresswoman. And, you know, the reality is these kinds of efforts, like the bill with Congressman Neguse, the 21st Century Civilian Conservation Corps, that I think can be a big economic multiplier with vendors in the private sector meeting those needs, the Oahe legislation. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It's because you bring people together. And the chairman and I have talked about this very often. When I was chairman of the committee, first place I went to was West Virginia, because my colleagues said, just come on out and, you know, listen. That's what people want, is they want people to have a chance to hear each other out and then find some common ground. And I'm convinced that in the middle of this pandemic, there's going to be an even greater appreciation for collaboration than there was before, because we've got to do it. It's what the president's talking about with Build Back Better, and you're setting a very good tone with your answers to my questions. I look forward to supporting your nomination, Congresswoman, and working with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Murkowski.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Congresswoman, welcome to the committee. Thank you for being here. I think it has been noted, certainly by my friend and colleague, the Congressman for all Alaska and the Dean of the House, that it is indeed very significant, your nomination to this position as the first Native American woman. We respect that. We've had an opportunity to discuss the very significant, in fact, outsized role that the department plays over Alaskans' lives, whether we like it or not. This is a relationship that some have described as landlord-tenant. That's not a very good relationship to have. We would much prefer it to be more of a partnership. I want to ask you in my first round of questions this morning to focus on the public lands aspect and the role, again, that Department of Interior plays with us. The federal government owns over 60% of all the land in our state. That's not as significant as in some states, but when you take into account that Alaska is 1/5 the size of the lower 48, it's a lot of land. It's critical to our resource industry, as you know, which accounts for billions of dollars in wages, in tax revenue, tens of thousands of jobs, and protecting those jobs is critically important at all times, but particularly now. Our state has seen the highest loss of revenue of any of the 50 states. We're sitting at about 33% revenue loss. Think about that. The next closest state is a 20% revenue loss, but on average, it's less than 1%. So we're hurting right now. Mm-hmm. And so when we see these executive orders coming out of the White House that not only impact a resource-based state like Alaska, but actually call us out by name. Call us out by name. We were one of only 2 states in the nation that were specifically targeted by President Biden's day 1 executive orders. And it wasn't just day 1 that we were targeted. We were called out on 7 separate occasions, which, from Alaska's perspective, you've got to understand that they're looking at this and saying, wait a minute, why is this administration out to get us? Well, I don't think they're out to get us, but I do think that there is a definite threat to the resource industry that our state is blessed to be able to host. So if you are confirmed to this very significant position, what is your approach going to be with regards to oil and gas and mineral resource development within a state like Alaska?
Senator, thank you so much. And if I could just quickly say thank you again for all of your help with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women legislation. That means the world to me. I realize your time's limited. I mean, first of all, Senator, I know that President Biden doesn't want to cripple any state. He put the pause on the new leases in order to review the program. I want you to know that if I'm confirmed, I will rely heavily on our relationship moving forward. I do want to work with you. I do want to make sure that I understand the unique issues in Alaska, and to make sure that we are doing all we can to ensure that your constituents have the opportunities that they need.
So let me just ask then, in that line, there have been a number of rulemakings that were finalized under the Trump administration. They're now being litigated in court. This includes the record of decision for Willow, the Ambler Access Project, the issuance of leases in the 1002. These RODs were developed by career civil servants pursuant to all the environmental laws that are out there, all the regulations, including NEPA, done through regular order in an open and transparent process. So a direct question would be whether you would ensure that the department continues to support and defend these projects and the decisions and the environmental reviews that were completed, again, by Interior's career employees.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, of course, anything that's under in the courts, of course, we would want to get an update and a status on those issues. Senator, what I could say is I would be very anxious to work with you, and I will follow the law. I will absolutely follow the law if I'm confirmed. That would be important, to say the least, and I think you can bet that I will consult with you regularly. I want to make the best decisions, if I'm confirmed, for the people of your state.
Defending these specific projects would be critically important in following that law. I would hope that we would have an opportunity for second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, let me start by clearing a few things up that I heard about my home state. We have not lost thousands of jobs in the oil and gas sector in New Mexico because there is no ban and because the industry stockpiled an enormous number of leases under the fire sale that Secretary Bernhardt had at the end of the last administration. However, I want to say we do recognize that we will need to move to a fully decarbonized economy. And frankly, pretending that isn't going to happen is not going to serve any of our workers well. And I would submit that energy workers would be best served if those of us on this committee show leadership by both investing in energy communities that have put us where we are today and in the technologies necessary to actively manage this transition. Now, speaking of workers, I want to ask you, Congresswoman, about the Great American Outdoors Act, because it provides $9.9 billion over the next 5 years to maintain and repair infrastructure on our public lands. And this is funding that can put people to work immediately, replacing roofs on visitor centers, repairing trails, improving campgrounds, doing things we should have done 50 years ago to invest in our outdoor recreation economy and in rural communities. And I just want to ask you, what steps can the Interior Department take to make sure that this funding is put to work as quickly as possible?
Senator, I know there are, as you said, many areas across the country. I think the best thing to do is to make sure we are consulting with each other, that we get a list of priorities and get to work. I can imagine that every senator on this committee would have a list of priorities in their own state for that funding, and I think it would be a tremendous boost.
Thank you. And, you know, one of the things about outdoor recreation is it really impacts our entire state in New Mexico. There are certain places that have oil and gas. There are certain places that have, wind potential. But outdoor recreation is something where we can invest in practically every rural community in the state. As you know, the Bureau of Indian Education established a top 10 priority list for replacing BIA schools in 2016. And top of that list was Laguna Elementary, which I know you're familiar with. They received some funding in 2018, but the project is still not finished. And it took 12 years to get through the top 10 list. So it's clear to me that this pace is inadequate, as there are 78 schools that have been designated in poor condition. And I would just ask you, can you commit to reviewing that school replacement list, looking for ways to improve and speed up the process, and tell us in Congress when we're simply not doing our part to fund these accounts?
Senator, it would be my pleasure. I was trying to add up how long ago I went to Laguna Elementary School, close to 50 years ago, and so I'm sure that it is, you know, it's been there for much longer than that. So there is a lot of work to do, and our children deserve to have opportunities to learn in the best ways. So yes. I'm
sure you're overestimating how long ago that was, but you know, another issue that we've had a chance to work on a little bit about, as you know, for centuries, sacred cultural items that belong to tribal communities have been taken to foreign countries and sold to the highest bidder. Now, we have laws in the United States that make the sale of certain tribal sacred objects a federal crime. However, we do not have a law against taking those same items overseas and selling them there. And that's a loophole that we need to fix. I have legislation with Senator Murkowski that would do that. However, even when we have an export ban in place, there are likely thousands of sacred objects already overseas that need to be brought back home to tribal communities where they belong. And the Interior Department plays a critical role in the international repatriation of those items, working with the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and others to ensure that tribes are able to reclaim these items that have been stolen from them. As Secretary, will you commit to making repatriation of these items an actual priority for the department? It is part of the responsibility, but I think it's something that just has not been fully elevated to a real priority in previous administrations.
Thank you so much, Senator, and Senator Murkowski, for caring about this important issue. It's heartbreaking. I've seen some of those pictures on the internet, and it's heartbreaking to know that folks who don't know the power or the meaning of those objects think of them as art, and they're definitely not art. So absolutely, that would be a very important issue, and I believe tribes would be grateful.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Langford.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Haaland, thanks for being here and for the dialogue. I'm sure you're very aware last week across much of the Midwest, we had very extreme cold temperatures that happened. We had a test on the Southwest Power Pool. While there was a lot of national attention that was on Texas and the long shutdowns there, we had issues as well. Our wind towers froze up. In fact, for several days in the Southwest Power Pool, we were actually running more diesel power than we were wind power, which is not uncommon for us to run 40% of our power by wind power. We had a real pull on all of our solar panels. Obviously, they were covered in snow at the time, or very cloudy days. And so we had quite a challenge on just being able to maintain power when we were negative 14 degrees. Mm-hmm. So the issues about power and reliability and resilience matter to us because we want to make sure that we don't lose access to this. So while jobs matter, and those are extremely important, it matters to every single consumer, the cost of energy, the availability of energy, and the diversity of energy. So we are truly an all of the above state, as you and I have talked about before. We have more renewables in Oklahoma that we use in our power than New Mexico does. We are significant in our use of renewables and appreciate those. But we have some real challenges that we want to make sure that we pay attention to. So let me drill down on a few issues because of some of your past statements and want to get a few things just in conversation. The Osage Nation and the Osage Mineral Council, they have a lot of oil and gas development in their tribal areas. They've had a challenge. In fact, we asked them about it. They said they've had 7 years of devastation brought on by onerous BIA regulations restricting access on their oil and gas well records, and then the Fish and Wildlife coming in and adding environmental impact statements that were entirely new to them. It's a significant portion of the income for the tribe, and it's significant to the state as well. what would be your standards on oil and gas development, mineral development in tribal areas?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And first, your comment about Oklahoma having more renewables than New Mexico. I don't know about Senator Heinrich, but that sounds like a challenge to me. So perhaps we can work on that. Senator, with respect to the pause on leases, I know that it's just on public lands, not on tribal lands. And so tribes should continue to move forward with their operations.
Do you assume that the rules would be different for tribal lands as they would be on federal lands in the days ahead? Because as you make recommendations, you've made some pretty bold statements in the past saying no fracking, no pipelines. I mean, some of the statements you made in the past, you're going to make recommendations to the Biden team, and you've said several times you'll follow President Biden's direction, but obviously as Secretary of Interior, you're making recommendations to them sitting at the table as well. Would your recommendations be different for tribal land development than they would be for federal land development?
Senator, I want to first assure you that if I'm confirmed as Secretary, that is a far different role than it is for, than a Congresswoman representing one small district in my state. So I understand that role. It's to serve all Americans, not just my one district in New Mexico. Of course, I can't answer fully those questions at the moment. I am not there yet. If I am confirmed as Secretary, I will absolutely take all these issues into consideration and of course, look forward to consulting with you.
But would your recommendations be that there would be a unique difference between tribal management of their mineral rights and oil and gas development, fracking, all of those things, pipelines, than there would be on federal lands?
Senator, I would be happy to look at the issue, to study it then if I'm confirmed and speak with you about it.
Let me show you a map. This is a map of one of the units for oil and gas area, and it doesn't matter the state, but it shows the complexity of this. For many of these leases that come up, a portion of the land would be, in this case, it's area that is tribal land, is what you see in the tan here. And then in the salmon color, it's Army Corps of Engineers managed, but that still has BLM oil and gas leases on it. So the challenge becomes there's different sets of rules when they go through this process. What I'm trying to get at is this is a common look as you go through the different leases that are there, is that anytime they start to do any kind of unit of development, they get complexity on what the rules are going to be. The rules are different in each of these areas. If you change that area from tribal land to private land, that even changes it more. So let me just ask you a question. Permitting-wise, would you look at this type of map and to say permits, not just the lease, but the permits would be different? If the federal lands had a moratorium on them, could they still develop the private lands? Could they still develop the tribal lands that are literally right next to the federal lands?
I understand. It's a sort of a complicated issue. So,
but that's what the real world looks like, yeah.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I would be happy to take a look at those, be briefed, understand the issue far better, and work with you if there's issues in your state.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to a second round.
Senator Rono. Senator, I think you're on mute. I think you're still on mute, Senator.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you, Congresswoman. I ask the following two initial questions of every nominee before any of the committees on which I sit. So here are the initial questions. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, ma'am.
It was very nice to see my friend Don Young introduce you. And I've worked with him myself, and I know how committed he is, especially to the indigenous people's programs. So I thank you for meeting with me a little while ago to discuss policy matters that are very important to me. And of course, the issues that relate to Hawaii's indigenous Native Hawaiian community are very important to me. And I note, as several have already noted, how historic and important it is that you will be the first Native American woman Native American and woman, poised to serve as Secretary of the Interior. And to note that you are a 35th generation Pueblo, which means that your people were in our country long before the rest of us ever came here. So I think the significance of your background is not lost on any of us.
Thank you.
So based on my conversation with you, I would expect that you will be very committed to working with us on Native Hawaiian issues, as well as the issues relating to other indigenous peoples, of course, the Alaska Natives and American Indians. We also discussed the concern about invasive species in Hawaii's very unique environment. And in fact, Hawaii, I think, is the invasive species capital of the country. And so it's so significant that this entire month in Hawaii has been dedicated to invasive species awareness. I know that I can count on you to work with me on addressing the concerns relating to invasive species. Finally, we discussed the relationship between the United States and the independent nations of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of Palau. These relations, governed by the Compact of Free Associations, are set to expire in 2023 and 2024. I encourage you, should you be confirmed, to work collaboratively with your colleagues at the Department of Defense, the Department of Interior, State rather, and the members of Congress to find ways to improve and expand the existing compacts through the renegotiation process and ensure that there is a fair and collaborative financial commitment to fund these compacts. I'm really glad, Congresswoman, that you noted the concern regarding the missing and murdered indigenous women and children. This is an issue that I would like to work with you, and I did bring up what more we can do with Merrick Garland during his confirmation hearing for Attorney General. You've been asked a lot of questions about fossil fuels versus clean, non-fossil fuels, et cetera, and I don't necessarily see that as some sort of a dichotomy necessarily, but can you discuss the job creation potential presented by a clean energy transition, even for families that have worked in the fossil fuel industry?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question and appreciate all of the issues that you raised leading up to your question. I am grateful for your support on so many of the issues that I worked on in Congress. And yes, well, President Biden is geared up to help create millions of jobs. And you've heard us talk about the Civilian Climate Corps. You've heard us talk about clean energy. I know that coming from a state in such as New Mexico, where we have over 300 days of sun per year and absolutely an abundance of wind, that those are all, there's many more places like that, and I think we can move our clean energy forward. Part of the reason why I feel very strongly about this coming from New Mexico as well is that if we have other streams of revenue that we can move forward to fund our schools, we don't suffer the booms and the busts that we've experienced in New Mexico as well. So, I feel strongly that technology moving forward in a place also like New Mexico with 2 national labs there, that the technology is something that will absolutely make a tremendous difference. Technology and innovation, as we've already talked about. We can't understate the value of that in the jobs that those 2 things can create.
Hawaii started off as one of the most fossil fuel dependent states in the entire country, where we were importing some 97% of all of our energy for electricity from outside of our state. And we have a very ambitious but attainable goal of becoming fuel efficient energy efficient by 2045. And that means that we intend to create these kinds of energy sufficient jobs in the state. So, I know that that is, of course, a possibility. I also wanted to give you an opportunity once again to emphasize the importance of working in a bipartisan manner, which you do very well, but maybe you can explain why you have you hold the record for probably introducing more bipartisan bills than your colleagues. And we're talking about a lot of people in the U.S. Congress, and you have a really good record.
Senator, the time is expiring.
Well, I just wanted to emphasize she's really good at that.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. Senator Cassidy.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman Haaland. I thank you for the visit the other day. I enjoyed our visit. Thank you. If I ask you questions that others have, I apologize. I'm right now, believe it or not, monitoring 3 separate committee hearings. I apologize. You spoke movingly of your personal history. And
Senator, I'm so sorry. I can't hear you very well.
Senator, speak up just a little bit if you can, or turn your volume up, please.
Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, how about
much
now?
better, much better, much better.
Bug right next to the thing.
You're up close and personal right now.
Yeah. If you could restart my 5 minutes, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, absolutely. Restart your 5.
Congresswoman Haaland, thank you. I enjoyed our visit. Your personal story is compelling. And one thing we spoke of are those families such as yours, and frankly, such as mine growing up, whose parents were able to have a better living because of something. In Louisiana, many of those better livings are related to oil and gas industry, pipelines, et cetera. And we understand that if there's kind of a campaign against them, there's many families which will have a less bright future. So with that said, let me first ask, do you agree with President Biden's executive order to stop the Keystone XL pipeline, knowing that 11,000 current or future jobs are eliminated because of it?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. And of course, I know that the Keystone has been, it's been an issue. Both sides very passionate on both sides. And with respect to President Biden's decision, it is his decision. He's the president. And so
then let me ask you this. In the context, Senator Barrasso mentioned kind of your attitude, that your perception as to how Republicans view science. So if I could point to a State Department report based upon science, which said that building the pipeline lowers global greenhouse gas emissions, if you were the president, would you eliminate the pipeline with the 11,000 jobs and the futures that are less bright for those families, knowing that by not building it, based on science from the State Department, we would have increased global greenhouse gas emissions?
Senator, thank you. I will be happy to read any report. I'll be happy to be briefed.
No, but I can stipulate, if you'll just stipulate that, because that is a State Department report. That is the science. I'm just hoping, no offense, that Democrats pay attention to the science, and that's the nature of my question. So if you can accept that as a stipulation, I'm willing to get it for you. But I'm just trying to understand, is this administration going to be, and will your department be guided by a prejudice against fossil fuel, or will it be guided by science?
Senator, if I could just take the liberty of saying prejudice on fossil fuels perhaps isn't the way I would describe it. I would say that President Biden is feeling in moving toward the tremendous opportunities that we have in diversifying our energy
That's
resources.
it's kind of dodging my question, Congresswoman, and I don't mean to be rude, but if is your department going to be guided by science or by something other than science? Let me put it prejudicially, non-prejudicially, because clearly the Biden administration was not guided by science, and Republicans, by the way, are guided by science. I'm just seeing if this administration will be, and if your department will be.
I have stated many times that if I am confirmed, that the Interior Department's decisions will be guided by science.
Thank you. Now, there is a Wall Street Journal article recently pointing out that if the United States cuts its production of oil and gas, global demand will not be affected, but global supply will come from other countries. Intuitively, does that make sense to you?
I beg your pardon, Senator. I apologize if you could just repeat that once more.
So there was a recent article suggesting that even if the United States decreases production of oil and gas, that global demand will continue the same.
Well,
so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I understand. I mean, we're hoping that when we create some of these clean energy opportunities, that perhaps that will change.
So when you were introduced by Congressman Young, he pointed out that 80% of a barrel of oil does not go for propulsion, rather it goes for the plastics and chemicals essential to modernity. For example, making the products that go into a wind turbine, the carpet that we are both looking at right now, whatever room we are in. So given that, even if we have clean energy, that 80% of it goes for non-propulsion purposes, would you agree that it's quite likely that even in the rosiest scenario, there will continue to be demand for oil and gas?
Yes, Senator, and I did say that in my opening statement.
So I guess I'll finish by asking once more, even if we decrease production, is it reasonable to assume that global demand will remain roughly constant and that supply will come from other countries?
Well, I appreciate the logic that you're explaining to me. I guess I would hope that that moving forward, we will all realize that we have a stake in our own future. And
well, I so believe that. I'll close by saying this, and it's the future of those families who just lost their jobs because of Keystone XL pipeline being shut down, and others involved in an industry producing a product that will be used worldwide. But perhaps if we're not guided by science and logic, they will lose their future. That's my concern. And I'm not being personal with you, but I am trying to represent those families right now who can't speak, but whose jobs are being cost for a political agenda, not based on science. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator King. Senator, I think you're on mute. You're getting close to unmuting, I think.
You've been unmuted, it says.
Now you're good.
Now I'm with you.
You're with, yeah. We'll get you back.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Let's
Chairman.
put 5 minutes back on the clock for Senator King.
Thank you. I first want to tell our witness that about almost 20 years ago, I took an RV trip with my family, and for the first time, in a serious way, visited the Southwest and found that the landscape was so completely different from where I live. It was a real revelation. Bandelier in New Mexico, White Sands, the travel that we did in that area was just, as I say, a revelation. And therefore, if confirmed, I want to invite you, Representative Haaland, to come to New England, and particularly to come to Maine and visit our incredible national park, Acadia, and the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument, which is only 4 years old, but is already having a positive impact on the region where it's located. So I would love to welcome you to Maine, and hope that you will take advantage of that invitation should you be confirmed, which I hope will be the case.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I'll come. Thank you.
Good. That was the right answer. You're doing great so far. Many of us on this committee supported very enthusiastically the Great American Outdoors Act, which passed last year, as you know, but there were some disturbing interpretations and execution of that law at the very end of the previous administration. I hope that you will review the law. I know that you supported it in the House, and be sure that the implementation is corresponding to the intent of Congress. I have a pet motto that implementation and execution are as important as vision. So I hope you'll commit to working with us to be sure that the Great American Outdoors Act is implemented in the way that was intended by Congress to maximize the benefits to the American people.
I absolutely would, Senator.
One of the issues that's of interest in New England and in Maine is offshore wind. It has enormous potential, energy potential. There's an experimental project underway now in Maine called Aqua Ventus, sponsored by our University of Maine. And I think one of the important areas that you can pay some attention to is the regulatory process and the timeliness. My approach has always been we want the toughest regulatory or the toughest environmental rules in the world, but we want the most timely and predictable process. So I hope that's something that you can take a look at, because this is an important potential energy source. It could really be a huge change for this country, and we just don't want I'm all for protecting the environment, protecting the fisheries, protecting the impact on fisheries, but I don't want the process itself to be a barrier to this important development.
I understand, Senator, and I would look forward to working with you on any of those issues. Final question is on the issue which I think is the low-hanging fruit of climate change, and that is methane. As you know, there were some serious methane capture regulations passed 5 or 6 years ago. They were essentially repealed by the prior administration. I hope that certainly on public lands, you will look to reintroducing those regulations, which are not terribly costly, at least that's my understanding, but will be enormously beneficial in terms of the elimination of greenhouse gases. As you know, methane is 80 times as dangerous as CO2. So anything we can do on eliminating methane releases into the atmosphere is critically important. Will you commit to reviewing those regulations about methane release in terms of drilling on public lands? Yes, Senator. And I understand, and I completely understand and appreciate you caring about this issue. We should be breathing clean air. Well, I appreciate your testimony here today and your responsiveness. And I guess the final question would be, do you commit to appearing before and cooperating with this committee as we try to exercise our oversight role and really want to be partners with you in the important role of the Department of the Interior? Absolutely, Senator. Good. Thank you very much. I look forward to supporting your nomination. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And now we have Senator Hoeven. Senator Hoeven, you're still on mute. Okay.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
We got you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member as well, and also to Congresswoman Haaland. Thank you for being here today, for your testimony, as well as for visiting with me on the phone earlier. I appreciate it very much. In North Dakota, we're an energy powerhouse for this nation. We produce energy really from all sources except for nuclear power, including renewables, biofuels, and wind, as well as fossil fuel, coal-fired electric, and oil and gas. We are the second largest oil producing state in the nation, producing about 1.3 or 4 million barrels a day now. One time we were over 1.5 million. We'll probably go back well up over that. Second only to the state of Texas in terms of oil production. Now, we work very hard to have the latest and greatest environmental standards. We continue to work that. We want to be an absolute leader for the country in carbon capture and sequestration. That being said, we've got to have transmission lines and pipelines to move energy to market. We've got to have that infrastructure. A very good example of that is the Dakota Access Pipeline, which has now been operating for 3 years safely, moving well over 500,000 barrels of light sweet crude oil a day to refineries, particularly in the eastern part of the state and other part of the country and other parts, which would otherwise have to get their oil from OPEC, Saudi Arabia. Instead, we produce it here with good job creation. So in the case of the Dakota Access Pipeline, which I say has been operating now for 3 years safely, you were there and protested the pipeline. Are you still opposed to that pipeline?
Senator, yes, I did go to stand with the water protectors during that several years back. The reason I did that is because I agreed with the tribe that they felt they weren't consulted in the best way. I know that tribal consultation is important, and that was the reason that I was there.
What is your position on the pipeline today?
Well, Senator, I know it's an important issue for you, and I understand that. I also agree that whenever these projects come up, that we absolutely should make sure that we are consulting with tribes if, in fact, these projects do affect their lands, their sacred sites, and the like. So
I understand. I'm sorry. Did you go ahead and finish? I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, sir. I am happy to get briefed on any of these issues if I'm confirmed. And of course, Senator, I would listen to you and consult with you and work with you to the best of my ability.
Well, I certainly understand the importance of tribal consultation, and that's been going on extensively, and it continues. Right now, the Corps of Engineers is conducting an environmental impact statement pursuant to ongoing litigation. As I say, this pipeline's been operating for 3 years safely now, moving more than 500,000 barrels of oil a day. But the Corps is going through an EIS process to comply with a court order. Do you agree that it's important for the Army Corps to complete its review in a fact-based, objective manner, and to do so promptly? Do you agree with it?
Senator, thank you for the question, and yes, thank you also for raising the issue that it is the Army Corps of Engineers authority. Where any of these issues come into the authority of the Department of the Interior, if I'm confirmed, I will absolutely give those things my attention.
But your answer is yes, the Corps should go through the proper process and complete its EIS. That is your position.
Senator, I think everyone should follow the law, and if that's the law, then absolutely.
Given your history being at the protest, are you willing to commit to recuse yourself from the matters that come before Interior related to the Dakota Access Pipeline in order to avoid any conflict of interest?
Senator, it's my understanding that there are attorneys at the Department of the Interior, and also ethics folks. If I am confirmed, of course, I will heed the advice of those attorneys and the ethics office for any issues where there might be any of those conflicts.
All right. Again, thank you for visiting with me earlier and for your time before the committee.
Senator, thank you also for working with us on the House side to get some important legislation passed.
And I know I'm just a little bit over, but I would also mention to you that the 3 affiliated tribes of North Dakota produces, just on their reservation alone, if they were a state all by themselves, they'd be about the 9th or 10th largest oil-producing state in the nation. And so they produce an incredible amount of energy for this nation, which brings incredible benefit to the 3 affiliated tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara. Mm-hmm. And their oil goes through that pipeline. Do you have any thoughts on that? Incredibly important for that tribe.
Senator, it's my understanding that if you're, with respect to the leases that we've been talking about, the the pause on the leases don't affect tribal lands, just the.
Right, but I'm talking about the ability to access Dakota Access Pipeline. That's how they move their product from the reservation.
Thank you so much, Senator, and I look forward to absolutely working on these issues if I'm confirmed and bringing you into the conversation as much as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Before I go to Senator Cortez Masto, I want to, for the committee's sake, we're going to have 2 votes here at 11:30, and what we're going to do is try to get through our first round. We're going to come back tomorrow at 10 o'clock for our second round. Congressman, would that be okay with you? Can you come back at 10 o'clock tomorrow?
Senator, I will do whatever you tell me to.
Well, I'm respectfully asking if you could be here. It would be much appreciated at 10 o'clock. So that'll be our second round. So everyone can kind of hold on that, if you will. And with that, we'll go try to conclude our first rounds. We've got about 3 more or 4 more senators. Senator Cortez Masto from Nevada. Do we have Senator Catherine Cortez Masto on?
Pass the gavel to Senator Van Hollen. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto. And
hold on 1 second now. We're not getting.
Chairman, thank you for your service.
Hello. Do we have Senator Cortez Masto? Okay, we're going to go to Senator Cortez Masto. Must not be available right now. She might be voting, and we'll go to Senator Hickenlooper, Colorado. Senator Hickenlooper. If Senator Hickenlooper is not available, then we're going to go to Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Congresswoman Haaland, and congratulations on this historic nomination to be Secretary of Interior. And I'm hopeful that through this confirmation process, we can gain a deeper understanding on how you intend to lead the Department of the Interior if you are confirmed. And as a Congresswoman, and I think you came in 1999, you've been there 2 years, a little over 2 years.
I was elected in 2018 and sworn in 2019.
And since you have been in that position, you've gone on record stating, I pledge to vote against all new fossil fuel infrastructure and to fight instead of 100% clean energy. And Mississippi, of course, that's on the outside of my door that says Senator Hyde-Smith. It has Mississippi under there, the state that I represent alone has a substantial energy infrastructure which provides thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions in economic output through the production of fossil fuels in our ports, our refineries, our processing plants, and many facilities in the great state that I represent. But by halting this production of essential fossil fuels, Mississippi jobs alone would be just decimated, leaving families without a source of income during an already troubling time economically. And halting offshore energy production would also deny my state resources that are now dedicated to conservation and other very good works. Frankly, your positions on energy are alarming to Mississippians. And what do you recommend I tell my constituents that are directly affected by this to assure them that their livelihoods and the way they make a living and provide for their families are still secure?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. And first of all, it might bear repeating that I was the most bipartisan freshman in my first term in Congress. That's because I came here to get work done, and I realized that serving as a cabinet secretary is far different from being a member of Congress, where I'm representing one district. It's representing every single American, and I recognize that there is a difference in those two roles, and I want you to know that cabinet secretaries, the administration is a co-equal branch of our government, just as Congress is, and so it's important that we're able to work together. And I can just promise you that I will listen to you. I'll take your I will take into consideration your issues and how you want to present them, and certainly will look forward to many more conversations about your state and how we can ensure the people of your state have what they need to move forward.
So you don't have any specifics on what I can report back to them of how their livelihoods are still secure with your leadership?
Senator, I would just like to also reiterate perhaps that President Biden has just put a pause on new leases, not valid existing leases. And I don't know when that review will be finished. It is a review the administration wants to do on the federal fossil fuel program. And of course, I know that the valid existing leases will move forward. There's thousands of those currently, and I believe the department is still moving permits through. So I feel like in the short term that hopefully their jobs have not been affected.
Okay, and for the future, I want to discuss the future of offshore oil and gas leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. A 2020 analysis concluded that banning federal leasing would result in nearly 14,000 Mississippi jobs lost in a very small state. We're less than 3 million. In the first 12 to 24 months, a decrease in offshore oil production by 44% and natural gas by 68% by 2030, increased dependency on imports by nearly 2 million barrels per day, and a potential loss of 32 million in our state revenue. And how do you foresee the future of offshore leasing when the Gulf of Mexico is vital to our nation's energy security by providing approximately 20% of America's oil and natural gas production? With your leadership in the future, if these things do come into pass?
Senator, as I mentioned, of course, it's just a pause. It's not a ban. It's my understanding that there are approximately 7,700 unused approved permits to drill currently that have not been put into use. And so there is a long way to go before, in order to make use of all the permits that are actually out there and ready to be used.
Thank you. And I have further questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator. And Senator Cortez Masto from Nevada. I think she's with us now.
I am. Chairman, thank you. And thank you to the ranking member. Congresswoman Haaland, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your dedication to public service and for your family's long history of military service to our nation. I also recognize, as a member of Senate Indian Affairs, the historic nature of your nomination as the first Native American woman nominated by the President to lead the Department of Interior. I want to thank you for taking the time with me prior to this hearing to go through some issues and talk about how we can collaboratively work together for the state of Nevada. As you and I previously discussed, over 80% of the land in Nevada is managed by the federal government. About 63% is specifically managed by the Bureau of Land Management. So public lands are vital to my state's economy, whether that be mining, grazing, outdoor recreation, and other means. It is so important that we have a good working relationship with the Department of Interior and the federal government. As you and I discussed, there's so much land that the BLM owns, particularly small parcels throughout the state of Nevada in many of our communities and metropolitan areas. And that's why over the years, Nevada has made a point of looking at how we can improve always our working relationship at the federal level. So having greater interagency and intergovernmental collaboration on permitting and compliance is important. Having the BLM prioritize numerous pending realty applications and recreation public purpose leases is important to us. Making sure that there's greater alignment between BLM and state and local governments on renewable energy and transmission siting is important to Nevada. And prioritizing the distribution of funds from the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act special account for regional conservation and environmental enhancement projects is important to Nevada. So, Congressman, can I have your commitment that you and your staff will prioritize efficient land management and greater collaboration with the state of Nevada?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
And then let me touch on something that I know I was listening to some of my colleagues talking about, but I want to put this in perspective. There's a lot of speculative oil and gas leasing on federal lands, and that is a concern of mine. And in recent years, the BLM has spent an inordinate amount of time and resources offering vast acreages for oil and gas development on lands where oil and gas industry doesn't really have any development interest, and on lands that have little to no potential for development. Making these lands available for leasing only fuels the speculation industry, and it really wastes BLM resources while locking up the land from being managed for purposes like wildlife habitat preservation and outdoor recreation and grazing. So I introduced the End Speculative Oil and Gas Leasing Act. I would ask you to commit to reviewing my bill and considering the value of implementing this policy. Will you be willing to do so?
I'd be happy to review your bill. Of course, I will have to read it first. I would love to work with you in any capacity on issues you think are important, and look forward to getting to know that more.
Wonderful. Thank you. In addition to all that we have discussed and more, I have worked very hard with my colleagues in Nevada and impacted communities and industries on alternative proposals to the Defense Department's modernization proposals for Nellis and Fallon training ranges in my state. In both instances, the Air Force and Navy have sought to expand their operations, which have substantive impacts on lands managed by the Interior Department, including wildlife refuges, popular recreational areas, family farms and ranches, and important tribal and cultural resources. The Department of the Interior must be actively engaged in these discussions and finding reasonable, workable, and collaborative solutions. If confirmed, will you commit that the Department of the Interior will seek to work with all of the stakeholders to find such solutions?
Yes, thank you. We will always work to strike the right balance, and I appreciate you caring about this issue, Senator.
Thank you. And one final commitment I need from you. In the fiscal year 21 NDAA, I included an amendment creating intergovernmental executive committees between the military and the Interior Department to allow local, state, and tribal governments a public forum to collaborate with the military in providing advice and exchanging information on the management of natural and local resources on federal lands in Nevada that are currently used for military purposes. Will you commit to expeditiously establishing these committees?
Senator, I love collaboration. I think that's a way we can make sure that things are moving forward, and I appreciate you caring so much about that, and I look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you.
Thank you
again for your willingness to serve.
Thank you, Senator. We have two more senators, then we'll adjourn. We have Senator Marshall at this time, and then we'll have Senator Hickenlooper finishing up. Then we'll come back to Mark 10, but we'll adjourn after these two. Thank you. Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, Congresswoman Haaland, and congratulations on your nominee. Thank you to the Chairman and the Ranking Member for giving me the opportunity. This is a dream come true for a little kid from Kansas to be on this particular committee. You know, I think about growing up, and why I'm on this committee is I want to leave it better than we found it. As a Boy Scout, that's what we were taught. And just looking forward to the days ahead of us that I can share with my grandchildren the national parks that I visited, and continuing this fishing and hunting across this great country, how we can continue to improve our environment but also have affordable energy. You know, where's that compromise to get both of those? That those are our goals, and that this affordable energy is very important to the prosperity and my grandchildren's future, just like it is the opportunity to visit these national parks. And of course, you know, finally, I think about energy and national security and how important those two issues are, and where they're combining, and the importance to my children and grandchildren, why this committee is so important, and your nomination is so important to me. Had the pleasure of serving on the Science Space Technology Committee in the House, and one thing we were taught was that this country is at a 25-year low for carbon production. 25-year low, incredible. That our carbon production is down 14% over the last decade. How would you explain that? How has this country got to this decreased carbon production through your eyes? What has been the success?
Well, we heard Senator Lankford talk about Oklahoma having more renewable energy than they essentially get credit for, and I think that a lot of states individually have worked hard. We have an Energy Transition Act in New Mexico that was passed by our state legislature, and I think everybody's working on the issue. I think climate change is something that folks are realizing. You know, it's an all hands on deck effort, and so I really appreciate your optimism, Senator. Thank you.
You bet. And I would just throw out that I think American innovations had a lot to do with it.
Absolutely.
Coal plants, burning plants are 99% cleaner than when I was growing up. The oil processing, our refineries. I grew up with 2 oil refineries surrounding my city. And just the air and the waters of Kansas are cleaner today than when I was growing up. I want to just briefly talk about prescribed burning and invasive species. Prescribed burning and grazing. Invasive species I've dealt with commonly on my own land would be the salt cedar and the red cedar. And generally, do you feel in favor of using prescribed burns and grazing opportunities to control invasive species?
Senator, I'm glad you mentioned invasive species. It's happened on Laguna with the salt cedar, right? It just took over immediately, and there was an effort to try to eradicate the salt cedar on the banks of the Rio San Jose. So I understand how fast those things grow, and I look forward to working with you to find ways to remedy those situations.
This 5 minutes goes by really quickly here, but lastly, I just want to talk about national parks for a second. One of my wife's bucket lists is to go to every national park in the country, and in our bedroom, she's got a little plaque, and each one of those she's checked off. And 2 years ago, we got to go to the Badlands and to Mount Rushmore. And when I think of national parks, I think about the 4th of July, my favorite holiday of the year. And just seeing Mount Rushmore and all its grandeur was something I'll never forget. And Governor Noem reached out to me last night, and she and her delegation want to invite you and President Biden back to Mount Rushmore for a 4th of July celebration. I hope you all can continue that tradition. I think it's great for America to celebrate our independence, and what a great place to do that. And again, I think about national parks. I think about Teddy Roosevelt, perhaps America's greatest conservationist.
Thank you, Senator. If the pandemic is over and we're able to travel, I've never been to Mount Rushmore, and so I appreciate that. I would also suggest that your wife get a national park passport.
Oh, we've got them. We've got them. You betcha we do.
You can put the stamps
in. It's one of the best deals in America to buy a year-long passport and go to all these national parks. It's an incredible country we live in. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thanks, Senator. And finally, Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Chair and Secretary Designee Haaland. Very nice to see you again, and appreciate you're taking the time with us with the committee today. Like New Mexico, Colorado has a very strong conservation community, a vigorous outdoor recreation community. One of the things I'm very interested in, I'm a co-sponsor of Senator Bennett's bill, the Colorado Outdoor Recreation and Economy Act, CORE, which would protect over 400,000 acres of public lands in Colorado, including new designations for Forest Service land. The bill enjoys broad support, bipartisan, of local elected officials, business owners, recreationalists, conservationists. I think communities across our state have been working 10 years on this bill as a historic effort to protect public lands. And the CORE Act is key to helping ensure that Coloradans inherit both a thriving outdoor recreation economy and pristine outdoor spaces, as you've already had or already have been discussing this morning. I know you are as committed to outdoor recreation and public lands as I am. I was impressed that you have been to so many of the public lands and are such an active outdoor recreationist. In regards to the CORE Act, the previous administration opposed the bill last Congress based on testimony that misrepresented the facts on the ground in Colorado. While they said it would reduce areas open to motorized recreation, the bill in fact does not close any existing roads, jeep trails, off-highway vehicle trails, or motorcycle trails. And I would ask that you commit to doing a full review of the agency's stance on the CORE Act to ensure that it reflects and is informed by an accurate understanding of the facts of Colorado.
Senator, I was a conferee on the NDAA last year, and I was disappointed that the CORE Act wasn't included after all. I know I can speak for myself, but I also know that President Biden supports a strong outdoor economy for our entire country, and I understand that the administration also endorses the bill.
Great.
So, yes.
Well, thank you. I also, like New Mexico, Colorado has, in addition to that conservation community and outdoor recreation community, an important oil and gas industry. And the developmental order stated that existing operations would not be impacted by the delegation of authority. And yet many ancillary aspects from, sundry permits, right-of-ways over BLM land, which are essential to those existing operations, would require approval from a small number of individuals, which sometimes can create time delays and new risks. And I've heard concerns from tribal groups, from operators that, then despite promises that the moratorium won't impact existing leases, that the constrained permitting process for the existing leases might become permanent. So I was hoping that you'd be willing to work with us to provide some certainty around those existing right-of-ways and existing permits that they will be not negatively impacted.
Senator, I'll be very happy to work with you. As I've mentioned before, the Congress is a co-equal branch of government. I think if we work together, we can get a lot accomplished.
Perfect. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And as you and I previously discussed, I strongly support keeping the BLM headquarters in Grand Junction. I know it's somewhat controversial. I've had conversations with a number of my Senate colleagues, particularly those representing states with substantial BLM lands, and I've seen broad bipartisan support for a headquarters office to remain in the West. I think we should absolutely avoid the mistakes of the last administration, but I think uprooting those 41 employees in Grand Junction and moving them again would be disruptive and likely result in the loss of even more BLM employees. The last administration, I don't think, managed the move properly. It was perceived as an attack on the BLM and trying to reduce its capabilities. And I think we haven't been able to realize the full potential of what headquarters or more of those jobs, especially if they were dispersed across the West, and that those jobs were committed to protecting our public lands and looking at things like outdoor recreation and all the uses on BLM lands. So I hope there's a path forward where we can find a solution that restores a fully functioning agency while allowing the BLM staff to work close to the lands they manage. As you consider this important issue, I'm hoping you'll commit to keeping an open dialogue and working with us Western senators.
I'll absolutely keep an open dialogue, and if you're inviting me to Colorado, I gracefully accept.
Well, that was my next question. We'd love to get you out to Grand Junction and let you see the BLM land out there, but also see the new headquarters and what it looks like.
Thank you, Senator. I'll look forward to consulting more on this issue with you, and I understand that we absolutely need to make sure that the staff members are, that we have a full team there at BLM. And just, you probably know this already, 90% of interior employees are actually outside of D.C., so they're all over the place.
And we applaud that. We applaud that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. And the committee will stand in recess until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the same room that we're in today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Senator.